Oddly enough, there's a lot of people in the mobile catering world that literally have little to no idea how much money they make. A common mentality is, I'm making money, it's fine, it's about X or Y amount, so what's the big deal? It's around this. Well, the big deal is, what if you're wrong? And the bigger deal is, what if you're consistently wrong? If you're not tracking it and punching in all your expenses and revenue regularly, you can very easily think you're making 20 or 30% more than you really are. It's obviously very common to think you're making more than less. This can impact things like growth, cash flow, because it's a volatile business, things go a bit like this rather than like this. So the predictability is really important to be able to track. There's two reasons why people don't work out how much money they're making. It either comes down to one, effort, being they just don't have the time or the system to do it, or number two, they just don't know how. We're going to focus on a remedy for both those things. We're going to come up with a simple way to be able to, I'm going to show you how to do this consistently and easily, so it's not a headache and you'll just do it every time you do an event. Now, you can wing it. A lot of people do, but if you'd rather run a business, like an actual business, which I'm sure you do if you're here right now, then please pay attention. All right, so the first idea here is the big picture versus the little picture. The big picture is all the profit you are making from events combined. And we're going to call that this our outside square. Fun fact, when you put a circle inside a square, it takes up just under 80% of the surface area. So if all the profit you've made from an event is in this green highlight, all profit, some people would call it gross profit. I'm not going to, because accountants are just going to criticize me and say, that's not gross profit. So we're going to call this all profit. And then basically what's going to happen is you're going to have expenses, things like insurance, car registration, things are going to break, you're going to have to replace them, all these sorts of expenses. And they are going to basically shave off some of that money. Growth included, by the way. So you're more than welcome to spend more than 20%, but it's a pretty healthy small business growth rate to be able to spend about 20% of what all your profit is on growth, day-to-day overheads, and that kind of thing. So what's left in the middle here is basically your paycheck, what you're taking home at the end of the day. I'm going to call this your paycheck. So I hope the big picture kind of makes sense here. It's very easy to look at all your profit as the money you're making and not really know where these kind of expenses should fit into the equation. You know, do you subtract your insurance and that kind of thing from each event, like divide it all up and try and work it out like that? But far the easiest way, what's going to keep you accountable and consistent, is by figuring out all your profit. That means the profit at each event, which is what we're going to go through today, and then subtract your overheads. Hope that makes sense. So people are going to laugh at me here, but this is, if you've never heard of how to calculate profit, well, it's as simple as revenue minus expenses, profit. If your expenses exceed the revenue, it's going to be a loss. We don't want that. Hope that's clear for anyone that wasn't sure. Now I'm going to introduce you to a concept called the ballpark food cost here. Now the reason a ballpark food cost is really helpful is when a lot of people go to calculate their food cost for an event, they'll say, all right, well, I sold 245 of the 310 units I brought. Some of them were wasted, so it's around 260 used. I'm not sure where the invoice is, so I'm not sure how much they costed. I'll find it later and I'll figure out how much I spent on food and I'll work out my profit then. And it just doesn't happen because who knows where the invoice is? It's in your email somewhere, your accountant's got it, who knows? But bottom line is we want to be able to come up with a very close estimate to what your food cost is so we can punch in a figure immediately every single time when we want to work out the profit made or forecasted profit for an event. And that's where the ballpark food cost comes in really handy. So we're going to go through this exercise together. And I want to really paint the picture to you of how to work out your ballpark food costs so you can trust the process and be clear that it's a pretty accurate estimate and why we're going to use that estimate as well. You'll see that a little bit later. So you want to take one day and you want to work out how much your food actually costs. And it's all well and good to sit down with a spreadsheet and do it like a mathematician and work out every percentage to a T. But you also want to work this out in real life because food vendors trade food, staff waste stuff, all sorts of things happen. So you want to know what's actually going on. So say you've ordered some stock for an event and you're going to track it one day. You're going to track it to a T. So you want to take this worksheet and use it on that day. Basically, if, let's say your stock you ordered for your tracking day, let's say it comes to $2,500. Just going to make my pencil a bit smaller here. And just say you sold 500 units. You might have given 10 units meals away because you're just a nice person. And let's say staff wasted 15. So total units there is 525. And at the end of the event, you're going to go, all right, how much stock have I got left? Most of the time, it'll just be a big pile of food. You put it in the freezer or the fridge at the end, or you might throw some of the perishables away, and you're not going to have the time or energy, and it's just not overly efficient to be going through and calculating the value of every single food item at the end of an event. So, but this time you're going to do it. So let's say you've got $245 left in food. So total stock you've used, 2255. Now if you've made 525 units, made as in realistically used, this 500 plus 10 plus 15, that means $2,255 is going to yield you, on average, 525 units. So now what we do is we divide 2255 divided by 525 because there's 525 units made with $2,255 for those who aren't mathematicians. So your food cost per unit is $4.30. Got to round up there. $4.30 per unit. Let's say your price point is, I don't know what we're selling here. Let's say it's $23. For those who don't know, you divide $4.30 by 23, and that equals 0.18. Let's round up to 19. That's very good, by the way. 19%. I probably should have made that $20 or a tad less, but you get the idea. That means you've got 19% food cost. The whole reason we want to approximate this is because when we have stock ordered and stock left over constantly, the amount of work and how realistic it is to go through and check through this every single time just to know what our final profit is, if we think we've got a pretty rough idea anyway, it doesn't really stack up as a priority. When we're busy business people like us, it just won't happen. So your ballpark food cost is 19% for this unknown product. Now, what are we going to do with that 19%? Well, let's say your revenue is 10K. Expenses are all listed down here. We've got GST, food, site fee, wages, fuel, gas, and a few other things, but let's focus on these for now. So GST is basically just divide 10,000 by 11. Food cost is 19%. Site fee, let's say it's $1,000. Wages, let's go $1,000. Fuel, let's say it's local, $100, local-ish. And gas, we might have gone through 4 bottles, $120. So your expenses, bear with me, I will calculate those. All right, so 1900, 999. We do have a pretty epic spreadsheet, by the way, but for the sake of this exercise, I think it's pretty important that you guys see step by step how it works. And basically, total of all of this is so we're going to subtract this from our revenue, which equals profit. Obviously, we're using this 19%. Our profit could be a little bit slightly different, up or down, very slightly, but it's dependent on your food cost. You know, you might be 1% more, 1% down on your turnover. But the main thing is, we've got a number we can work with that we know is very, very close to what it needs to be. At the end of the financial year, when you're working out your net profit less all your overheads, you can work out your exact profit for everything. But for the sake of each event, it makes all the sense in the world to use the ballpark instead of relying on an exact calculation adding up every little expense possible and maybe being $50 or $100 above or something like that. Cool? So the accurate P&L, we're just going to leave as part of the worksheet here because obviously this isn't perfectly accurate. Like I've said, we're using 90%. Could be up or down. Again, depending on where you've sourced your food, it might change a little bit, but it's very important to be able to get a ballpark estimate. Accurate P&L is basically the only thing that's going to change is your food cost. And instead of putting in a percentage, you're going to put in X amount of food. And the only way you're going to get this is by working out exactly how much you've sold, and you're going to get an exact profit. Of course, it's not the most efficient way to do it, handwriting and adding up, subtracting everything, but it's a really good representation of why using a ballpark food cost can be a lot more efficient than trying to nail your profits every week, like a lot of people get hung up about. So I hope that all made sense. Yep, that's all for today, team. Hope you enjoyed. See you in the next video. Bye-bye.